What if, Tensura, melting the eternal frost author. JackDaWeb on Wattpad. This story depicts an alternate timeline wherein Velzard attends Walpurgis after sensing Veldora's presence. She subsequently meets our protagonist and becomes interested in him after his display at the meeting. After thinking for a bit, she decides to move to Tempest and becomes a close ally of Rimuru. Rimuru and Velzard will sometimes be out of character, OOC, as it is unavoidable for this premise. Rimuru, our protagonist, will be more rational and have an actual spine. Velzard, she will not be as cold and ruthless as her canon counterpart. Since Velzard is missing significant characterization in the early parts of the series, the author decided to write his own interpretation of her personality based on the original light novel. I recommend at least having seen the second season of the anime, since the story picks up from that point. This fanfiction will follow the main story beats from the original light novel, though some arcs will be glossed over if there are very few changes to the canon events. Chapter 13. A new challenger arrives. Third-person POV. Over the course of a week, Tempest transformed into a city brimming with anticipation. Streets, once quiet, were alive with activity as citizens of all kinds worked to prepare for the upcoming founding festival. Colorful decorations were strung along walkways and buildings, while markets and food stalls began to pop up, filling the air with enticing aromas and the chatter of festival excitement. Meanwhile, the Grand Colosseum rose to completion, its stone walls gleaming in the sunlight as artisans added intricate details to its exterior. The dungeon was finalized shortly after. Its entrance was situated near the Colosseum and was already drawing in curious eyes. Rimuru, overseeing both projects, ensured the finishing touches were completed. With the dungeon fully constructed, his next focus was fine-tuning its challenge. Test runs by adventurers had exposed a steep difficulty curve that, if left unadjusted, might risk driving people away. After careful discussions with Ramirez and other overseers, they smoothed the progression, ensuring each floor presented a balanced mix of challenges and rewards. The dungeon itself was a marvel. Every 10 floors, adventurers encountered a powerful boss guarding access to the next section. To reach the final floors, they must conquer 4 archdragons, each an intimidating force. In the lower depths of the dungeon, environments shifted dramatically. Lush forests gave way to icy tundras, then scorching deserts, creating an otherworldly experience that tested adventurers' resilience and adaptability. Glittering treasures and rare artifacts lay hidden in each area, luring adventurers with promises of fame and fortune as they descended. Milam, intrigued by the dungeon's setup, eagerly joined the preparations by personally subduing the archdragons meant for the penultimate floors. At Rimuru's request, she chose creatures that were fearsome but not impossible, creating a final stretch filled with heart-stopping battles that led directly to Veldora, the final boss of the labyrinth. To ensure adventurers' safety, Rimuru implemented mechanisms like the resurrection bracelet, which would restore a fallen person's life once, and the return whistle, allowing weary adventurers to teleport back to the surface to recover. Resting points along every 5 floors offered weary travelers a respite, while carefully curated inns provided a place to exchange stories, gear up, and rejuvenate before pressing on. Finally, word of the founding festival spread. Invitations were dispatched across the continent, reaching leaders and chieftains eager to secure their place at Tempest's inaugural event. Many looked forward to meeting Tempest's leader. They sought not only to gain favor and protection but to witness firsthand the power of a demon lord who now commanded the great Jura forest and whose allies included the storm dragon Veldora and the frost dragon Velzard. Under Rimuru's reign, Tempest was a place of promise, adventure, and a potent reminder of the strength that tempered his kindness. He was a leader whose rule no one dared to challenge. Rimuru's POV. The last several days in Tempest had been a whirlwind. Between finalizing preparations for the founding festival and overseeing the dungeon's opening, the city had become a lively, bustling hub. Everywhere I looked, stalls were being assembled, each promising to bring its own flavors and experiences to the festival. To my surprise and slight amusement, even Veldora had thrown himself into the excitement by opening a takoyaki stand. Tempest's vibrant nightlife was about to level up, and I was looking forward to seeing everyone enjoy the results of their hard work. But first, I had to get through my last meeting of the day with the various tribal leaders across the great Jura forest. Clad in my demon lord attire with a finely crafted crown resting on my head, I sat on my throne overlooking the city's center. To my right, Velzard stood elegantly, her presence both dignified and commanding, while Shuna was positioned on my left, calm and composed. I greeted each leader individually, engaging in small talk to put them at ease. While most of these chieftains were respectful, a little tension cropped up between the Gozu and Mezu leaders. They exchanged sharp glares, and for a moment, it seemed things might escalate. Fortunately, a subtle release of my aura was all it took to remind them of where they stood. My aura had grown notably stronger, too, evolving into something called Draconic Demon Haki. After prolonged use of true dragon magic, it had adapted, even incorporating trace elements of Turn Null, making it exceptionally dangerous. Though not as formidable as Dragon Spirit Haki, it carried a similar lethal edge, capable of tearing through matter if released with enough force. The thought of this power intrigued me. Perhaps when I fully evolve into a true dragon, my element might encompass the endless void itself. The title, Void Dragon, Rimuru Tempest, had a nice ring to it. Seal, would it be possible to create a skill reflecting my true dragon status, similar to the Veldora or Velzard ultimate skills? Yes. Upon completing your evolution, I could create the ultimate skill, Lord of the Void, Rimuru. You could even bestow this skill upon Veldora or Velzard. It would allow them to restore you perfectly, summon you, and wield void magic, a skill similar to imaginary collapse. That's perfect. But how can you predict all this despite me not being a true dragon yet? All necessary information is accessible through the calculated projection. The final component is simply the restructuring of your constitution to match that of a true dragon. I chuckled inwardly, grateful for CL's thoroughness. This skill could be incredibly useful, especially as an insurance policy. I considered who might be the better candidate to whom to entrust it. Velzard was clearly the stronger of the two, and I could count on her to wield it responsibly. But then again, Veldora would likely throw a fit if he found out I'd given Velzard an exclusive skill. If I modify his ultimate skill with additional sub-skills, that may satisfy him without putting world-ending power in his hands just for a manga binge. Returning to the present, I refocused on the next leader in line. It was the chieftain of the Lizardmen, Abaru. The sight of him brought a sense of nostalgia. It wasn't long ago that I was just a Demon Lord seed meeting his tribe for the first time. Things have changed since then. Not only had I ascended to a Demon Lord, but I now possessed a true dragon egg as well. Abaru approached, kneeling respectfully before me. I gave him a nod of approval. "It is an honor to be in your presence, Rimuru-sama," he greeted, his tone as formal as ever. Good to see you, Abaru-san," I replied warmly. "How's everything been on your end?" I asked. He offered a soft smile, and his eyes held a hint of pride as he answered. "We're doing just great, Rimuru-sama," he said, and I nodded in satisfaction. "If I may ask, how has my son, Gabiru, been doing?" "I trust he hasn't been lazing about," he questioned, eliciting a chuckle from me. "Ha ha ha, not at all. Gabiru's been hard at work in our research department and has become a formidable combatant. He's been a valuable asset to Tempest," I assured him, and Abaru nodded, visibly pleased. "It's good to hear that. He seems to have matured well. Thank you for guiding him, Rimuru-sama," he replied, his gratitude evident in his voice. "Gabiru has earned it with his own effort. I'm sure he's made you proud," I said. I inclined my head in appreciation as Abaru rose, bowing deeply before he spread his wings and took off back to his domain. After watching him depart, I glanced to my right, only to find Velzard immersed in a manga. She held it delicately but was fully absorbed, a slight smile tugging at her lips. Sigh. So much for my elegant and poised companion. Standing on my left, Shuna gave me a knowing smile, amused by Velzard's quiet moment of indulgence. I turned to her. "Was Abaru the last visitor for today?" I asked, and she nodded. "Yes, Rimuru-sama," Shuna replied with her characteristic softness. "Good work, everyone. I think that wraps it up for today," I announced, a sense of relief washing over me as I stretched slightly in my seat. Shuna gave a graceful bow. "Thank you, Rimuru-sama. If you'll excuse me." With a final nod, she departed, leaving me to enjoy a few precious moments of peace. Tilda? You seem quite tired, Rimu-kun. Would you like to get dinner before we go home?" Velzard asked, her tone light but a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. I stretched and sighed, finally stepping down from my throne. "I'd like that, actually. Today's been a bit much," I replied, my mental exhaustion breaking through my words. Velzard chuckled, her teasing smile widening as she watched me. Foo tilde, look at you, Rimu-kun. Quite the picture of a powerful yet benevolent demon lord, she teased, and I rolled my eyes. Hey, if I don't keep up appearances, people might underestimate me for being too nice. I mean, come on, I'm not a delicate maiden here. I shot back, clearly a bit frustrated. Velzard's laugh was warm and genuine. Then, with a sudden shift, she leaned closer, reaching out to gently hold my chin. But you are beautiful, you know, she said in a voice so low and silky that it caught me off guard. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. Vels-chan? What are you saying all of a sudden? I stammered. She just grinned, her gaze steady as she leaned in even closer, her lips curving into a smirk. But, she said, pulling back with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. Let's save the fun for later. We have dinner to look forward to, don't we? She held her hand out to me. Ah, you can't just do that, you know. I muttered, regaining my composure as I took her hand. A light giggle was her only response, her tone conveying satisfaction. With our business done, we headed off through the bustling city streets. The night had come alive in Tempest, with the lively crowds, the vibrant lights, and the new food stalls adding a fresh charm. As we approached the restaurant, I noticed a familiar figure at one of the stalls. Veldora stood proudly behind a takoyaki stand, and a surprising number of people had gathered to try his food. Yo, Veldora, I called out. Didn't expect to find you running a food stand. I remarked. Seeing you taking up a trade is quite a sight, Velzard added with a chuckle. Veldora threw back his head, letting out a booming laugh. Kuahahaha. Good evening, Rimuru, Velzard nay. Yes, the Storm Dragon's legendary takoyaki is the talk of the town. Just look at this line, he declared proudly. A smirk tugged at my cheeks as I glanced at the long line. Not bad. You seem to have a knack for this, after all, I praised him. Would you two like to try a sample? He handed us each a stick with a piece of takoyaki, looking rather pleased with himself. Velzard and I exchanged glances and accepted the offering. As soon as I took a bite, I felt a spark of surprise. The flavor was rich and balanced, with a soft yet savory texture. He'd actually pulled it off. I'd half expected something on Xian's level, but this was leagues beyond. My, this is actually delicious, Veldora-kun, Velzard said with a genuine nod of approval. Veldora's face reddened slightly, though he tried to keep his usual confident air. Is that so? Well, I shall accept such praise from you, Velzard nay, he said. After finishing our samples and a bit more light-hearted banter, we waved goodbye to Veldora and continued toward our restaurant. Before long, we arrived and were led to our usual table by a polite Goblina waitress who welcomed us warmly, clearly accustomed to our frequent visits. Once we placed our orders, Velzard and I settled in, and she brought up the day's audiences. There were quite a lot of leaders today, weren't there? More than I anticipated, she began, and I nodded. I know, it's surprising to realize how many civilizations have taken root here. The Great Jura Forest is vast, and there's still so much I've yet to discover, I replied. Velzard smiled, and we settled into an easy, comfortable silence. We both enjoyed the bustling atmosphere and the quiet sense of accomplishment that came with the day's work. As large as your territory is, it's going to be a headache trying to micromanage everything, Velzard joked lightly, raising an eyebrow at me. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Yeah, I can already feel the incoming headaches, I muttered, and she laughed softly. But quickly, her tone grew more serious as she continued. However, isn't the biggest issue still the Western nations? Even if Luminous abolished that old decree about monsters being enemies of humanity, I doubt they'll embrace Tempest so easily, she added, and I gave a slight shrug. True, but the Western nations aren't likely to do anything drastic anytime soon unless they're feeling particularly reckless, I replied dismissively. Velzard's eyes gleamed with interest. Tilde? That's a confident stance from you, Rimu-kun. You weren't so bold about that before, she commented, and I couldn't help but chuckle. I suppose I've become a bit more prideful. I've learned enough to know when to worry, and I know that most humans don't pose a true threat to us, I answered earnestly. Her smile widened, clearly pleased. That's good. Cautious but confident, benevolent, yet commanding. I like that balance in you, she said, and I grinned back, feeling a little warmth at her words. Anyway, as for the Western nations, I might have to assign someone to represent Tempest in their council, sort of an ambassador, I announced, my chin resting on my hand. Velzard's expression turned curious. Why would you need an ambassador? She asked, her curiosity piqued. I leaned back, mulling it over. I doubt I can just stroll into human territory as a demon lord without raising alarms. If we're aiming for coexistence, it needs to be handled delicately, I explained. Interesting idea. So, who's suited for this diplomatic role? She asked, intrigued. Well, Diablo would be the obvious choice, but he's already swamped with work. Besides, we need someone powerful enough to command respect yet diplomatic enough not to resort to, Diablo's version of problem-solving, I replied, unable to contain a slight chuckle. Velzard tapped her chin thoughtfully. After a moment, her gaze sharpened as if an idea had just struck her. Actually, I might have a suggestion for someone who would be perfect, she said, breaking the thoughtful silence. I blinked, sitting up. Really? Do you know them personally? I inquired. Not directly, but we know someone who does. She let her words linger just enough to keep me in suspense. Well, who is it? I asked, a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Blanc, the White Primordial, she replied casually. I believe Diablo-san knows her, so you'll have to ask him for more details, she added. Another Primordial? My surprise was immediate. Having one Primordial as a subordinate is wild enough. 2? That's probably overkill, even for me, I remarked, and Velzard laughed a rich, melodic sound. Foo tilde indeed. But, really, since when have you been normal, Rimuru-kun? Hearing her remark, I clutched my chest dramatically. Gah! You wound me, Velz-chan, I said, but she only rolled her eyes playfully. You've got 2 true dragons on your side and a named primordial as your subordinate. You're as abnormal as they come, she teased. Fine, I said, waving her off. When our food arrived, we dove right in, savoring each bite while the city's festive energy buzzed in the background. Between bites, we bantered about our next hot spring visit, though Velzard was quick to veto the idea. We both knew if Veldora caught wind of how often we went together, he'd never let us live it down. I could already picture his dramatic reaction and the endless teasing. He must never find out. We wrapped up our meal and paid before heading out into the night. The city felt more alive than ever, with lights and stalls stretching along the streets and people busily setting up decorations and preparing for the festivities. It was different from the usual calmness at this hour, and I found the vibrant atmosphere a refreshing change. As Velzard and I walked through the crowd, the sounds of laughter and excitement filling the air, I couldn't help but feel a rare sense of peace, like all the hard work of building Tempest was finally coming to fruition. Such a shame we couldn't go to the hot springs today, Velzard murmured, sounding genuinely disappointed as we walked toward home. I shrugged, nudging her playfully. We can always go another time. Or, there's the one right outside the house, I suggested half-heartedly, already knowing her response. She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. And risk my little brother walking in on us? She shot back, her tone filled with amusement. Good point, I replied, stifling a laugh. Though, let's be real. Veldora's usually glued to his manga. The odds of him ever leaving the house willingly are low, I countered. True, she said, laughing softly. All right, let's go next time, Rimuru-kun. It's getting late anyway, she said. Agreed. I'm beat, I replied as I stretched my arms, feeling the day's weight settle in. When we finally arrived home and stepped inside, we were met with a surprising sight. Veldora, fast asleep on the couch, sprawled out in a very undignified pose, utterly oblivious to the world. Sigh. This guy didn't even make it to his room. Hopeless as always, Veldora. Beside me, Velzard covered her mouth, stifling a giggle at the sight of her little brother passed out in the middle of the living room. It was funny seeing him worn out for once. It's probably because, for once, he actually did something besides reading manga all day. We exchanged an amused glance before quietly heading upstairs. In our room, we both changed into comfortable sleeping clothes, the day's events and laughter lingering in the air. After turning off the lights, I settled into bed, lying on my back and staring at the ceiling, feeling the gentle quiet of the room seep in. Just as I was starting to drift off, Velzard's face appeared above me, her eyes soft yet full of something playful. She leaned down, pressing a quick, warm kiss to my cheek before turning away, her face slightly hidden in the dim light. I blinked, a small smile creeping onto my face. She could be so unpredictable at times, but I couldn't deny I liked it. Quietly, I shifted closer to her, wrapping my arms around her waist and resting my face near the back of her head, breathing in her presence. I needed that, I whispered, my voice soft, barely a breath. "Good night, Vels-chan," I continued. Unable to resist the temptation, I leaned in to nibble at her ear. "EP," she squeaked, and I gave a low chuckle, delighted by her cute reaction. She rolled over to face me, her cheeks a delicate pink as she pouted. "HMPH. Gee, good night, Rimuru-kun," she stammered, trying her best to sound annoyed. I grinned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. As the room fell back into its peaceful silence, I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth that wasn't just from the blankets, and drifted comfortably into sleep. A new day already? I opened my eyes to the soft morning light filtering through the window and let out a relaxed yawn. That was some of the best sleep I'd had in ages. I stretched, savoring the calm quiet of the room. Glancing over, I saw Velzard still fast asleep, her breathing even and peaceful. Her snow-white hair fell softly across the pillow, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. How cute. Not wanting to wake her, I silently took 2 mugs of coffee from my imaginary space, the steam swirling up from mine, dark and rich, just how I liked it. For Velzard, of course, I had her coffee iced. It was cold, smooth, and refreshing, even at this early hour. I placed the frosty mug on the nightstand beside her. After a moment, her eyes fluttered open. She stretched, rubbing her eyes as she looked over at me groggily. "MMHM. Good morning, Rimuru-kun," she murmured, her voice laced with sleep. "Good morning, Vels-chan," I greeted, smiling as I handed her the iced coffee. "Your favorite, iced to perfection," I said, and she took the mug with a grateful nod. "Thank you," she replied, sipping slowly, her expression brightening at the taste. Once we finished our coffee, we got ready for the day. The founding festival was just around the corner, and more preparations required overseeing. I teleported us to my office, where I'd soon face a barrage of paperwork and meetings. There was no rest for the ruler of Tempest, it seemed. Shortly after we settled in, Shuna arrived with the first batch of documents. Thankfully, there wasn't too much, just a collection of minor business proposals and approvals for festival stalls. I dove into the stack, approving most of them since they seemed like solid additions for the upcoming guests. After running through the papers, it was time for a short break before the next meeting. Velzard and I decided to stroll around Tempest to pass the time. It was an excuse to relax and, truthfully, a way for me to enjoy her company without the weight of paperwork. The festival preparations were well underway as we walked through the bustling city square. Stalls were going up, decorations hung, and the whole city buzzed with a vibrant energy that was refreshing. Our conversation drifted to light-hearted topics, Velzard teasing me now and then about small things from the past. A few minutes later, we encountered a group of 4 adventurers gathered in the square. They looked out of place amid the bustling crowd and were clearly outsiders. They seemed to be here for the dungeon, although it wouldn't be open for a few more days. My eyes drifted to the oddest one of the bunch. He was a timid-looking man with blonde hair. Strangely, the other 3 adventurers seemed to orbit around him, treating him with exaggerated reverence. Then, one of them suddenly pointed at me with a triumphant look. "Would you look at that? The demon lord himself has shown up to bask in your presence, Masayuki-sama," she announced, her voice catching the attention of those around us. "What? Bask in his presence? I don't even know this guy." The 2 other party members nodded in vigorous agreement while the so-called Masayuki looked increasingly uncomfortable as he shifted awkwardly and tried to downplay the whole scene. "Jiwoo, can you shut up?" Masayuki hissed, clearly wishing he could disappear. The man in glasses, ignoring him entirely, laughed before continuing. "Surely you jest, Masayuki-sama. This demon lord here stands no chance against your might," he declared. My eyes narrowed as I looked at the group, utterly confused. Beside me, Velzard stifled a grin, finding the whole situation amusing. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Who the hell are you guys?" I asked bluntly, crossing my arms. One of them was a tall, muscular guy. He sneered before joining in. "Be quiet, Demon Lord. Standing before you is none other than the great lightspeed hero himself, Masayuki," he bellowed. "We've come here to defeat you in battle." The guy in glasses added with a dramatic flair. "You must accept our challenge or be deemed a coward." His voice boomed, and at that, my eyebrow twitched. These idiots are so in for it. A smile stretched across my face, but it wasn't a friendly one. Beside me, Velzard glanced at my hand, which had started to twitch slightly. She sensed the shift in my mood immediately. Usually, I could brush off arrogant adventurers, but this was my territory, and I was not about to let this disrespect slide. Tapping my foot firmly on the ground, I looked them over with an icy gaze, enjoying how their smirks faded as the atmosphere changed. The crowd around us seemed to sense it, too, quieting as I spoke. "You've got guts," I said, my voice cold, each word carrying a weight of authority and restrained power. Talking like that directly to a demon lord's face. I'm struggling to decide whether it's bravery, arrogance, or just stupidity. "So, tell me, oh so great lightspeed hero Masayuki, which is it?" I pressed further, lacing my words with immense pressure. With calculated precision, I released a tiny pulse of my draconic demon haki. An invisible pressure swept over the square, washing over the adventurers like a tidal wave. They dropped to their knees instantly, their eyes wide with terror as the weight of my presence bore down on them. The crowd around us stepped back, watching with a mix of awe and fear. The adventurer's bravado evaporated in seconds, and Masayuki looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "We didn't mean to," the man in glasses stammered, but I cut him off. "Oh, but you did mean to," I interrupted, my tone dangerously calm. "I may not know you, but clearly, you know nothing about me either. Because if you did, you'd know better than to challenge me in my own territory with empty words," I said. Velzard's gaze flicked to me, a satisfied smirk gracing her face as she watched me handle the situation. "Masayuki's pav, is this it? Is this where I die?" Every thought in my mind screamed at me, drowning in the terror that consumed me. These idiots couldn't just keep quiet. I'd warned them, told them over and over that I wasn't the hero they believed me to be, that it was all a misunderstanding. But no, here we were, on our knees before a demon lord at the mercy of his overwhelming power. We couldn't breathe under the weight of his aura pressing down and crushing us. My heart pounded wildly as his golden eyes, cold and piercing, narrowed at me. The fear they instilled, it was like staring into the abyss. Please forgive our insolence, Demon Lord Sama. I beg of you, show us mercy." I choked out, my voice trembling. I hoped, no, I prayed he'd take pity on us. He studied me for a second, and the intensity of his gaze made my stomach churn. My party members were speechless, barely hanging on. They looked paralyzed, kneeling alongside me as we fought to withstand his presence. Somehow, I managed to hold myself together better than the others, but just barely. Yet, even so, I could feel the terrifying truth. The guy was holding back. Then, as suddenly as it started, the pressure lifted. We all collapsed slightly, panting, desperately gulping down air. My legs shook uncontrollably, my knees aching from kneeling on the hard ground, but I was too grateful for the reprieve to care. Tilda, you sure went easy on them, Rimu-kun, the woman beside him teased, her long, snowy white hair swaying gracefully as she looked down on us with amusement. Easy? What part of that was going easy? We nearly fainted from the slight release of his aura. The demon lord, Rimuru, glanced back at us with a severe expression. Usually, I'd let comments like that slide, but not this time. I won't tolerate disrespect toward myself, my people, or my nation. Do I make myself clear? He asked, and we nodded furiously, not daring to speak. We were too rattled to do anything else. He sighed, reaching into his coat and pulling out a potion. Without warning, he splashed it over us, and in an instant, all the pain vanished. My exhaustion disappeared, replaced by a feeling of restored energy. What kind of healing potion is that? Once we'd recovered enough to sit up, he continued, his gaze sharp. Now, mind explaining what you're all doing here in my country? He asked, one eyebrow raised. A bead of sweat rolled down my forehead as I scrambled to gather my thoughts, hoping to avoid further offending him. We're a new adventurer party. I managed to stammer out. One of the quests we picked up was to investigate the nation of monsters. I continued, my voice still shaky. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully at my response, then sighed. Did you guys happen to pick up this mission from the Free Guild? He asked, a hint of suspicion in his tone. We all nodded in agreement, eager to cooperate. Why yes, I confirmed quickly, though the quiver in my voice was undeniable. Rimuru's eyes narrowed as he considered our answer, his gaze distant, as though piecing together a puzzle. Yuki, he murmured under his breath, a name I barely caught. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I knew better than to push my luck right now. My party members clearly shared the sentiment, remaining silent and watching him with trepidation. Let's move this discussion elsewhere, the lady beside him suggested coolly, breaking the silence. Our break's ending soon, she added. Rimuru nodded, his tone firm as he addressed us. You four, follow us. We'll continue this conversation somewhere more private. He turned, then stopped, glancing over his shoulder. Oh yeah, I almost forgot, he said, a deadly calm settling over him. My name is Rimuru Tempest, the Soul Devourer. And this beautiful lady is my second in command, the Frost Dragon, Velzard. Chapter 14 Welcoming the Guests Masayuki's POV Soul Devourer? That's his title? My stomach churned, and my mind spun, trying to process what kind of person could even have a title like that. I glanced at my comrades, feeling the tension roll off them in waves. Finally, it seemed, they realized how much they'd messed up. The terror was written all over their faces as, in a split second, they dropped to their knees and bowed deeply to the two figures before us. Velzard-sama, please forgive our impudence, they shouted in unison, voices trembling. The white-haired woman giggled, adding to the chill crawling up my spine. Rimuru let out a long, tired sigh. Fufufu tilde your banter was amusing to witness, she replied, her tone light-hearted. Banter? That was no banter. I could feel my nerves fraying as she gazed over my party, then looked directly at me with a curious glint in her eyes. You seem to be quite lost, Hiro-san, she remarked, her voice playful. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, unsure how to respond. My comrades turned to me, their expressions a mix of horror and concern. Before I could react, Jinrai stepped behind me and shoved my head into a bow. Ooh, what the heck, man? I groaned, flinching at the pressure on my neck. If forgive our leader, Velzard-sama, Jinrai stammered, his voice barely concealing his panic. He's still a new adventurer, he explained. The others nodded fervently, backing him up with matching looks of terror. Velzard simply giggled again, waving off their apology. That's fine. It seems he doesn't even know who I am, she said dismissively. Jinrai released his grip on my head, and I slowly straightened, wincing from the strain on my neck. I rubbed it as I glanced up, relieved that, for now, she seemed amused rather than angry. Then Rimuru turned his attention to me, his gaze sharp and curious. Are you perhaps an otherworlder, Masayuki? He asked. I blinked, taken aback. Otherworlder? I repeated, tilting my head in confusion. Someone who isn't from this world, who arrived here through reincarnation or getting summoned, he explained, his tone casual but his eyes watching me closely. Ah, so that's what they call it here. I guess I am, I answered truthfully. My party members stared at me, wide-eyed, their expressions a strange blend of shock and awe. This was clearly news to them, but they kept silent, seemingly too overwhelmed to comment. Rimuru nodded thoughtfully. I figured as much. The name Masayuki sounded a little too Japanese to be a coincidence, he murmured. Upon hearing his words, my attention sharpened, and a spark of hope flared up in my chest. You know of Japan, Rimuru-san? I asked, unable to hide the excitement in my voice. Could he be? Of course, he replied cheerfully, a warm smile breaking across his face. I originally came from Japan, after all, he said, and my eyes lit up in relief and joy. Finally, someone else from my world. Really? That's a relief to hear, I said, grinning. He chuckled, seeming genuinely pleased to see me relax a bit, though my party still gawked at me with an odd mixture of reverence and confusion. Let's continue this conversation somewhere else, Rimuru suggested, gesturing toward the street. There's a bar nearby. Let's head there, he said. We nodded, grateful for the offer, and fell into step behind him and Velzard as they led the way. Velzard was clinging to his arm, and though my life had just been threatened, a pang of envy flared up in me. TCH, lucky bastard. As we walked, my party members filled me in on just who Velzard was. I struggled to keep my composure as they explained that she wasn't just anyone. She was one of the few living true dragons, the most supreme, godlike beings in existence. And of all the true dragons, she was the strongest currently alive. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. And there's another one living here, too? My head swam. This guy, Rimuru, was insane. He was collecting the world's strongest beings like some kind of twisted Pokemon trainer. After a short walk, we arrived at the bar. The warm, inviting atmosphere settled my nerves a bit. It reminded me of the bars back in Japan, with its cozy, dim lighting and traditional charm. We took seats at the counter, initially declining drinks, wanting to avoid offending them further. But Rimuru insisted, and his friendly smile was somehow reassuring. Hesitantly, we placed our orders, still in disbelief at everything we just learned. As I sipped my drink, I glanced at Rimuru and Velzard, trying to wrap my head around it all. There was something surreal about sitting here with a demon lord and a true dragon, chatting like it was an ordinary evening. It was hard to reconcile the terrifying aura I'd felt earlier with the casual, almost friendly vibe now. Rimuru's pav, since I'd nearly knocked them out cold with my aura earlier, I decided to make it up to my unexpected guests by treating them to drinks. I mean, what better way to smooth things over? They started it, anyway. And I did fully restore them afterward, so no harm was done. I was surprised to find out that Masayuki was an otherworlder from Japan. Running into otherworlders isn't exactly common, so I was curious how he ended up here. His story turned out to be similar to Hanada's. He hadn't been reincarnated or summoned. He just appeared one day. That makes him a stray. But the real kicker was the unique skill he'd picked up upon arrival. Velzard, Masayuki, and I relocated a few seats away from his party, keeping our conversation private. I created a soundproof barrier and added a little illusion to keep his friends from wandering over. So, about this troublesome skill of yours. Would you mind explaining what you mean by that? I asked, taking a sip from my glass. Masayuki sighed, looking more than a little exasperated. It's called Chosen One, and the best way I can describe it is plot armor. You know what I mean by that, right? He asked, gauging my reaction. I nodded, intrigued. A plot armor skill, huh? Ha ha ha. That sounds pretty handy if you ask me. Where's the trouble in that? I teased, only for him to groan, his expression turning pained. It's like some supernatural force controls events around me, making me look heroic whether I want to or not. And it's always on. I can't turn it off, he complained before taking a swig of his drink, and his frustration was evident. It's helped me survive a few tight spots, sure. But now I'm praised as this big, brave hero, even though I haven't actually beaten anyone, he admitted honestly. Velzard and I exchanged amused glances, chuckling at his predicament. You, my friend, are the embodiment of suffering from success, I laughed, patting him lightly on the back. Masayuki sighed, staring into his drink. You don't know the half of it. It's so bad that I've almost died multiple times because people think I'm that capable. He added, it was hard to keep a straight face. Here he was, practically drowning in success and hating every second of it. We then asked him to go over the specific sub-skills of Chosen One, and what he described was nothing short of insane. Banner of the Supreme King lets him call upon fallen allies, temporarily replicating their abilities, memories, and experiences within himself. Hero's action pushes his allies toward becoming heroes, making his name famous in the process. Hero's blessing gives him and his allies insane luck, making lethal attacks weaker and turning their own attacks devastatingly strong. It also makes people view his actions positively no matter what he does. Hero's charisma fills his allies with courage, even in desperate situations, and allows him to turn defeated enemies into allies. Hero's haki, Velzard and I just stared at him, speechless. A unique skill this powerful? It was practically on par with an ultimate skill. If this thing ever evolved into one, it could actually be a bit concerning. That is not a problem, Rimuru-sama. If you wish, I could place a permanent seal on that skill to prevent it from being used or evolving. Seal? There's no need for that. He's harmless, really. Besides, I doubt he'd ever use it against us intentionally. Foo. I am merely ensuring your safety, Rimuru-sama. Any potential threat must be dealt with, though I shall overlook this one. Still, you made that suggestion so casually. With skill nullification from Shub Nigarath, I could easily nullify most ultimate level skills. This unique skill would be trivial for the god of harvest. You really are something else, Seal. I'm lucky to have you. He. Praise me more, Rimuru-sama. Shub-Niggurath and Azathoth are the pinnacle of ultimate skills, created solely for you. Ha ha ha. You just can't hold back, can you? But that's why I've gotten this strong. Thank you, partner. It is my pleasure, Rimuru-sama. Though Masayuki wasn't a threat, his skill was something else entirely. Accidentally overpowered or not, he'd definitely put up a fight without even trying. I wonder if entering him into the fighting tournament might be interesting. Masayuki, how about entering the upcoming tournament? I asked, my curiosity piqued and a glint of excitement in my eyes. Tournament? He echoed, tilting his head in confusion. The fighting tournament, I exclaimed. One of the main events of the founding festival is the grand opening of the Colosseum, and a massive tournament will kick things off, I explained, unable to contain my excitement. Masayuki's face paled, and he nearly spat out his drink. Absolutely not. Two things will happen if I join. Either I miraculously make it to the end with my ridiculous skill, and then everyone expects me to fight you. Or I get pummeled by someone else. Either way, I'm dead meat. His frantic explanation only made Velzard and I laugh. Ha ha ha. It won't be that bad, Masayuki, I said, giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder. I wrapped an arm around him, taking a swig from my glass as if that would somehow reassure him. Velzard chuckled, amused by the whole exchange. Fufufu tilde how cruel of you, Rimu-kun, she teased, and Masayuki raised his voice in protest. There's no way I'll make it out alive, he cried out, but I merely gave him a shrug. Relax. Nobody's dying in this tournament. And if people want you to challenge me, you can always say no, I grinned, clearly enjoying this far too much. He sighed heavily, finally caving. Fine. I'll think about it, he muttered, defeated. That's the spirit. Cheers! I exclaimed triumphantly, holding my glass out to him. He raised his drink reluctantly, and we clinked glasses. I'll fill you in on the details later, I told him more earnestly this time. For now, feel free to tour the city and enjoy the festivities. I'd show you around myself, but I'm a bit buried in work, I said. That's fine, Rimuru-san. Thanks for the offer. He gave me a respectful nod, probably relieved to get a break from the tournament talk. Third-person POV. After finishing their drinks, the group expressed their gratitude to Rimuru and explored the city, eager to experience the sights and sounds of the ongoing festival. He, however, couldn't afford to relax for long. His mind shifted back to the busy task of preparing for the arrival of the esteemed guests who would be joining the festivities. The guests in question were no small matter. Leaders from nations with diplomatic ties to Tempest were arriving, including representatives from the armed nation of Dwargon, the sorceress dynasty of Sarian, the kingdom of Blumund, and the Holy Empire of Lubelius. Milam, of course, would also be attending, along with Carrion and Frey, who were both respected in their own right. With all these influential figures coming together, things were nothing short of chaotic behind the scenes. Yet, despite the hectic preparations, there was an undeniable air of excitement surrounding the city. The Colosseum was ready for its grand opening, and the newly completed dungeons symbolized Tempest's growing power and influence. The streets were bustling with activity, and the city had never looked so vibrant. One of the event's most anticipated highlights was the music festival, which would bring an eclectic mix of music from Rimuru's old world to this one. It was a bold and exciting addition to the festivities, one that had everyone eager to see how the guests would receive it. As preparations continued, Rimuru took a brief detour to Ingrasha. He had a personal invitation to deliver to his students and, of course, Yuki. Despite his outwardly friendly demeanor, Rimuru's suspicions regarding Yuki hadn't subsided. To be safe, he had sent Sue and his followers to monitor Yuki's movements, keeping an eye on him from the shadows. Their mission wasn't just to observe Yuki. It was also to ensure the safety of the children under Rimuru's care. Days passed in a flurry of activity, and soon enough, the night of the grand opening arrived. As preparations peaked, the city was a blur of energy, and the streets were lined with eager spectators. Rimuru and Velzard would be among the first to arrive at the dining hall, where the nobles and distinguished guests would gather for the evening's festivities. The Tempest executives, prepared and present as always, would follow closely behind, ensuring everything went smoothly. However, there was one notable absence. Veldora, ever the free spirit, was nowhere to be found. Instead of attending the official events, he had taken up his position at the center of the city, managing his takoyaki stand with an almost unmatched enthusiasm. The stage was set. The guests were arriving, And Tempest was about to host an event that would go down in history. Velzard's POV, the founding festival, was finally upon us, and the city of Tempest had reached a crescendo of activity. For days, the city had been abuzz with preparations, and now, it was time for the fruits of everyone's labor to shine. From the freshly paved streets to the twinkling lights of the newly built Colosseum, everything about Tempest tonight seemed magnified, radiating a sense of grandeur. The atmosphere was electric with festivity. Vendors lined the streets, their stalls bursting with vibrant colors and exotic goods. Musicians filled the air with joyous melodies, and the scent of food and freshly baked treats wafted through the streets. Tempest had never looked so alive, and as I made my way into the grand dining hall, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling in my chest. The hall was magnificent, its towering columns adorned with garlands and banners bearing the Tempest insignia. The long dining table, set with the finest silverware and crystal glasses, gleamed under the soft light of chandeliers. I arrived just in time, slipping into my seat beside Rimuru, who, as usual, seemed to carry himself with an unshakable sense of calm. His presence had a certain regality tonight, which was no surprise. The other members of Tempest's inner circle began to arrive, one by one, until the entire table was filled with Rimuru's most trusted allies and dignitaries. The executives were present, as were Ramirez and her subordinates, the eccentric yet brilliant members of the Tempest government. The first to arrive were the leaders of the various nations allied with Tempest. Gazel Dwargo, the Dwarven King, and his two subordinates walked in with their usual gravitas. Following closely behind was the King of Blumend, accompanied by his wife and a small entourage of bodyguards. Next, Luminous Valentine and her subordinates arrived. Luminous, ever the enigmatic figure, was dressed in a maid's uniform, an unusual choice, though it suited her perfectly. Hanada, ever composed, was by her side, her presence as poised and dignified as ever. Then came Milam, her vibrant energy practically crackling as she entered the hall, flanked by her subordinates. It was the first time I had seen her in Tempest since she came to assist with the dungeon. While I had been preoccupied with my own matters, seeing her now, so radiant and full of life, made me feel a strange pang of regret. I hadn't spoken to her properly, but seeing her happy put me somewhat at ease. I resolved to catch up with her later. The final guests to arrive were the most unexpected of all. Elmesia El-Ru Sarian, the empress of the sorceress dynasty of Sarian, walked in with an air of quiet authority. Her two companions were the elves Rimuru was familiar with. Archduke Errol Grimwald and his daughter Elyan were by her side. The other guests gasped in surprise, for the empress was known for rarely leaving her domain, much to the shock of many in the room. Her arrival reminded me of my own reluctance to socialize with others in the past. As everyone settled into their seats, the room's attention turned to Rimuru. With the guests all gathered and the atmosphere quieting, it was his moment to speak. I couldn't help but admire the way he carried himself tonight, looking every bit the king he was becoming. It was impossible to ignore the dignity emanating from him as he stood before the guests, his expression warm yet commanding. Rimuru began to speak, and his voice rang out, clear and confident, with a gravitas that fit the occasion. I would like to thank all of you for answering my invitation. As you may all know, I have recently been officially acknowledged as a new member of the Demon Lord Council. So, with that, I decided to host a grand event to celebrate the occasion. My hope with this festival is to reshape what it means to be a Demon Lord in the eyes of the world. This is a chance to showcase the strength and unity of Tempest, and I want everyone here to experience all that our city has to offer. To my esteemed guests, I hope you all enjoy your stay and take in everything we've worked so hard to build. He finished his speech with a light bow. There was a brief pause before applause broke out, and I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for him. He had truly grown into the role he was meant to play. It was a speech worthy of a king. Ho ho! You've gotten quite good with your speeches, Junior. Gazel's deep voice boomed from across the table, a genuine smile on his face. Rimuru chuckled at the compliment. Of course I have. I couldn't get it off my mind after your harsh criticism of my speech last time, he shot back. Era? What's with you calling him, Junior, Gazel-chan? Elmesia's voice chimed in, intrigued. This guy likes to think he's my senior just because he's been ruling longer than me, Rimuru replied with a playful grin, which earned a few chuckles from the guests. Gazel, ever the mentor, added, it's not just that. You still have much to learn as a king, although I can certainly say that you've improved significantly. he praised, his voice genuine yet stern. Thanks, I guess, Rimuru muttered, a little uncertain. Milam, ever the curious one, suddenly piped up. Oh, you two have known each other for a long time, she asked, her loud voice catching everyone's attention. Yes, Milam, we formed diplomatic ties just before you first visited me, Rimuru answered with a smile. The room seemed to pause for a moment as Milam's presence registered in the minds of the other guests. Almost in unison, they turned toward her. Milam? As in the destroyer? Nearly every guest gasped in shock. With a loud, boisterous laugh, Milam threw her hands out to her sides. Wahahaha! Yes! It is I, Milam Nava, one of the ancient demon lords, she introduced herself loud and proud. A hush fell over the room, everyone momentarily stunned by the revelation. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. Milam hasn't changed one bit. After a brief pause, the guests slowly regained their composure, though many still exchanged glances of disbelief. Rimuru Dono, you really should inform us ahead of time about important things like this, Errol grumbled, rubbing his temple in frustration, and Gazel nodded in agreement. Fufufu, sounds like this isn't the first time something like this has happened, Elmesia remarked, her sharp gaze flicking to Errol, who seemed more patient than most. She certainly doesn't miss much, does she? The last time I visited here, I was suddenly struck with the news that the storm dragon had returned and was residing in Tempest, Errol explained, which drew immediate gasps and surprised murmurs from several guests who hadn't yet confirmed the truth of the matter. Ehehehe. I'll try and inform you all next time, Rimuru replied sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. His light-hearted tone failed to hide the sighs of exasperation from Gazel and Errol, who exchanged knowing looks. You really are quite the abnormal one, Rimuru-san, Lewis commented in jest, which caused a few chuckles to ripple through the room. Rimuru chuckled in return, the tension slightly easing, but the atmosphere remained tense. By the way, there's one other thing I'd like to confirm, Elmesia suddenly chimed in, her voice laced with a distinct seriousness that immediately cut through the light-hearted banter. Her tone was sharp and deliberate. Gazel and Errol exchanged glances, immediately understanding the gravity behind Elmesia's inquiry. The air seemed to be still as everyone in the room waited, a sense of anticipation building around her. What is it, Elmesia-san? Rimuru asked, his curiosity piqued. Elmesia's gaze never wavered as she fixed Rimuru with a calculating look, her following words carrying an almost imperceptible weight. Are the rumors true? She asked, her voice firm, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. The entire room fell silent. The tension in the air thickened as all eyes shifted between Rimuru and Elmesia. This wasn't just casual curiosity. It was a direct demand for confirmation. For a moment, Rimuru looked confused, but then Errol explained. The frost dragon, Rimuru Dono, he said, his voice earnest as he clarified, ensuring no confusion about the subject. Is it true that she now resides in this nation and has taken your side? Gazel continued, his tone now laced with both curiosity and caution. His voice carried the weight of years spent as a ruler, and he knew full well what such an alliance could mean. Now, all eyes were firmly fixed on Rimuru. The question, hanging in the air, seemed to magnify with each passing second. Rimuru took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the room. He remained calm despite the overwhelming pressure. Then, he closed his eyes briefly with a sigh, allowing the weight of the moment to settle in. I suppose a formal introduction should be in order next. Since everyone here already knows me, I'll let the person you're all curious about introduce herself, he began. He shifted his gaze toward me, his voice carrying a quiet command, leaving the final reveal in my hands. All eyes turned toward me, and the atmosphere now cracked with tension. Fufufu tilde how cruel of you, Rimuru. I knew exactly what he was doing, but I couldn't deny the thrill of the moment. I stood slowly, gracefully, as if the room itself had fallen silent in anticipation. A calm smile adorned my face, an expression of poised elegance that matched my stature as one of the true dragons. I smoothed my dress and looked at each guest, meeting their wide eyes with unspoken understanding. They waited in silence, each breath held in expectancy. Good evening, esteemed guests. My name is Velzard, the Frost Dragon, I began, my voice calm yet resounding through the room with undeniable authority. As some of you may have all surmised, the rumors are true. I do reside in Tempest. It's my pleasure to meet all of you. I finished my introduction with an elegant bow. The words I spoke were met with a thunderous silence. For a moment, no one moved. The guests, those who had never seen me before, took a moment to process the gravity of my presence. Then, their expressions shifted from curiosity to pure shock as realization dawned. Their eyes widened, mouths agape, and faces frozen in disbelief. I glanced over at Milam, whose expression mirrored the others. Her eyes were wide in surprise, but her gaze had an unmistakable glint of excitement. The silence was broken suddenly as most guests jumped to their feet in unison, their shock evident. "Velzard-sama? Auntie?" they exclaimed. Their voices rang out in unison, each word tinged with astonishment and awe. The sheer force of their collective reaction was enough to rattle even the most composed individual in the room. "No need to be so alarmed, everyone," I said softly, raising a hand to soothe the gathering. "Also, Rimuru-kun is right. We should all introduce ourselves formally," I suggested, my tone light and dismissive as if the dramatic pause had been nothing more than an amusing diversion. I sat back down smoothly, my eyes glancing across the stunned faces of the guests, who slowly began to calm themselves. The abrupt tension in the room began to dissipate, the air once thick with astonishment now easing as the guests slowly retook their seats, though the occasional whisper lingered in the background. With the shock fading, the introductions began in earnest. They were brief, formal, and filled with a growing sense of normalcy as everyone shook off their surprise and resumed their social duties. The introductions were quick since there weren't many, and soon, the focus shifted entirely to the feast. The food, as always, was exceptional. The people of Tempest had outdone themselves, presenting an even more extravagant spread than usual. The guests who had previously experienced Tempest cuisine were still astonished, their eyes wide with admiration as they marveled at the culinary artistry before them. As the event continued, I couldn't help but refrain from teasing Rimuru as much as I usually would. The formality of the gathering demanded a certain level of decorum, but oh, how I wished to see the looks on everyone's faces as I poked at his personal habits. Rimuru was engaged in small talk with the guests, casually informing them about the festival and the events it celebrated. But as I absent-mindedly enjoyed my meal, some of the guests' attention returned to me. It wasn't until Rimuru tapped me on the shoulder that I realized they were waiting for something more. "So, Velzard-sama, if you don't mind me asking," Almesia said, her voice again filled with friendly curiosity, but I could sense a deep layer of genuine interest beneath her words. "What made you decide to move to Tempest?" she questioned, her tone inquisitive yet respectful. A few guests looked at me expectantly, and their gazes fixated on my answer as if my reasons for joining Tempest would provide some critical insight into this powerful alliance. "I guess I don't mind sharing a bit," I said, my voice lilting slightly as I continued. "During Rimuru-kun's ascension into a demon lord, I decided to move here. I was surprised to see my little brother, Veldora, show up at Walpurgis and even more surprised to learn that he had taken Rimuru-kun's side. On a whim, I decided to move to Tempest to keep an eye on Veldora-kun. Plus, Rimuru-kun piqued my interest, so there's that too," I answered honestly but briefly. The room absorbed my words with a mix of surprise and confusion. There had been no shortage of rumors, but hearing it from me seemed to be a different experience altogether. Rimuru seemed embarrassed by my bluntness, his face flushing slightly, but he quickly hid it behind his usual calm demeanor. "I guess that makes sense. When the rumor first spread, I adamantly denied that such a thing could happen, but I guess reality is sometimes strange," Gazel remarked earnestly, nodding in agreement. Erold followed suit, offering a solemn nod of his own. "It's safe to say that in terms of military might, Tempest is up in the rankings," he said matter-of-factly, his tone almost reverent. "A true demon lord with the backing of 2 true dragons, that's ridiculous," he muttered, and Almesia chuckled at his words. "I'm sure Rimuru-san here will need that much power," Almesia commented lightly, a pleasant smile on her lips. "You're right. Aside from protecting my nation and allies, I need power to accomplish my goals," Rimuru responded with quiet confidence. "Hearing that takes me back to your saying, ideals without power are nonsense, and power without ideals is empty. Short yet simple, those are good words to live by," Gazel praised sincerely. Rimuru scratched the back of his head awkwardly, a sheepish smile tugging at his lips. "Era tilde such a fine quote, Rimuru-kun. I suppose you said it before we met," I teased, enjoying the slight discomfort in his expression. Well, yeah, it was before I attended Walpurgis and became recognized as a demon lord, he answered, a little flustered. It was his answer to my question when I asked him what he would do with such power, Errol added with a chuckle. The group laughed lightly, the moment of tension broken by the familiarity and warmth of the exchange. Just as the conversation settled, Milam suddenly floated over to where we sat, her presence as commanding as ever. I momentarily froze, the tension in my chest rising. Sensing my slight unease, Rimuru touched my shoulder gently, offering a silent reassurance that everything would be fine. I quickly calmed myself, suppressing the growing amusement that had threatened to burst out as Milam reached us. The shift in energy was palpable, and I returned my usual smile, maintaining a composed demeanor despite the rising excitement in the air. Wahahaha! What do you say we spar for real this time, Rimuru? Milam suggested joyfully, her voice brimming with the kind of enthusiasm that was both infectious and alarming. Rimuru's face immediately fell into a look of disapproval, his eyes narrowing. No way. As I am now, I'm still nowhere near your level. Rimuru shot down the idea instantly, but Milam wasn't easily deterred. Instead, her intense gaze turned to him, scrutinizing him as if she could see straight through his words. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Nothing can hide from my eyes, Rimuru. You've gotten so much stronger since Walpurgis, she retorted, her excitement practically radiating off her. Her tone was full of playful challenge, but there was an edge of genuine curiosity beneath it. Rimuru, sensing her determination, cast a glance toward me. It was a silent plea for help. His eyes begged me to intervene. But before I could respond, Milam's attention turned to me with a gleam of mischief in her eyes. Plus, I'm sure you've been helping Rimuru grow in strength, Auntie Velzard. Milam chirped, and I felt the surprise hit me like a sudden gust of wind. Her sudden shift of focus caught me off guard. Really well. I guess I have been teaching him a few things here and there. But he's right, you know? While he has the greatest potential for power I've seen, he's currently nowhere near your level, Milam-chan, I explained softly, my voice smooth, but I couldn't help the quiet chuckle that bubbled up at the thought of Milam's disappointed expression. Milam pouted cutely, her disappointment palpable, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. There was something about seeing her sulk that tugged at the protective instincts I had for her. Oh, man, I really thought I could have a friendly battle with Bestie, she lamented, slouching in mock defeat. It stung a little, but I masked it with a gentle smile. How about this? When I become stronger, I promise to spar with you, Milam. Besides, it won't be fun for you right now, considering I'd lose almost immediately, Rimuru said, his voice warming with sincerity, attempting to cheer her up. His words worked almost instantly as Milam's eyes sparkled with renewed, radiant joy. The guests, watching the exchange, shared looks of intrigue, some even raising an eyebrow at the playful dynamic unfolding before them. Others, however, wore expressions of mild concern, sensing the conversation's unpredictable nature. You promise? Milam asked, her hands gripping Rimuru's shoulders and shaking him with an enthusiasm that was borderline overwhelming. Oh, yes, I promise. Now, please stop shaking me. Rimuru's voice cracked as he pleaded in an exaggerated panic, his hands raised in surrender. Milam released him with a victorious grin, clearly pleased with the promise she had extracted. But then, as if fate had given me an opportunity, a thought entered my mind, and with a teasing grin, I leaned in closer to Milam, the warmth of my smile matching the playful glint in my eyes. What about we have a spar instead, Milam-chan? An upcoming tournament will occur in the new Coliseum. We could enter it as a special event in the tournament, I suggested, my voice calm and filled with amusement as I looked down at her. Her face lit up in a way that could only be described as sheer excitement, her eyes shining like stars. Rimuru's expression, on the other hand, shifted dramatically as his eyes widened in horror. Do you mean it, Auntie Velzard? Milam asked, practically vibrating with enthusiasm as she rushed closer to me. Her words were a whirlwind of excitement, and I could see how eager she was to take up the challenge. I gave her a soft smile and a nod, confirming my suggestion, but Rimuru's reaction was far from what I had expected. Oi, what do you two think you're doing? A battle like that would destroy the entire city. Rimuru shouted, the panic evident in his voice as the other guests shared his sentiment. Their eyes flicked nervously between us, though it was clear they also shared a certain degree of fascination. Don't worry about it, Rimuru-kun. It's only a friendly spar. Besides, with the help of Veldora-kun, you could maintain a strong enough barrier to contain the bottle's destruction, I reassured him, my voice soft and full of mischief. Though I could see his agitation soften slightly, I knew well that he was still not at ease with the idea. The other guests exchanged eager glances, their excitement palpable. I could see their interest peaking at the thought of such a display of power. I vouch for this idea, Rimuru. Just think of the publicity this event would generate. It's a grand spectacle that most people won't ever see. Ramirez piped in excitedly, her eyes practically gleaming with anticipation. Her words seemed to seal the deal as more of the guests nodded in agreement. This would be the perfect special event for the opening of the Colosseum, Rimuru-sama. Once the main bracket of the tournament finishes, this fight could serve as the greatest finisher to an opening celebration, Benimaru added, and the executives around us murmured their approval, all sharing the same eager look. Rimuru, finally realizing he was outnumbered, sighed audibly in defeat. He pinched the bridge of his nose, resigning himself to his fate. "Do you two swear you'll hold back?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of frustration and acceptance. His eyes darted between Milam and me as if trying to gauge our sincerity. Milam and I nodded in unison, our smiles radiating with unspoken agreement. The tension in the room lifted slightly, though I could see the anxiety still lingering in Rimuru's expression. "Then I guess we could arrange this event as the tournament's finale. It should be a completely separate battle from the main bracket," he muttered, slumping into his chair as if the weight of the world had just settled onto his shoulders. "We're lucky to witness such a grand event," Harold remarked excitedly, his voice full of anticipation. The other guests nodded, their eyes reflecting the same eagerness. "A battle between the gods is about to take place," Gazel added, his voice thick with admiration, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought. "Wahahaha! Then it's settled, Auntie Velzard. I will take you on in the tournament," Milam declared triumphantly, her voice booming with pure joy as she raised her fist in the air toward me. Before I could respond, I hesitated, a new thought forming in my mind. I leaned in closer to Milam, my expression shifting slightly as I steeled myself for a different kind of conversation. "By the way, Milam-chan," I began, my voice softer now, laced with a gentle curiosity. She turned to me, her excitement temporarily dimmed by my tone. "What is it, Auntie?" she asked, tilting her head, her eyes wide with interest. I paused momentarily, my thoughts gathering as I leaned in just enough for her to hear me clearly. "After our spar, I'd like to talk to you about something. Will that be fine?"